I'm going to now tell you a little bit about what's on my tiny little mind today. Before I do, I would love to tell you something that this is the truth, and if you don't believe me, you call Lynn, my wife, and ask her. It is honestly the truth. And I already mentioned to you I'm going to be leaving on a cruise tomorrow if we can get to the ship. Um, Lynn wants to go on a cruise, and I'm going to join her. Okay, let's put it that way. But last Wednesday night we had our son-in-law and we had our granddaughter here, and we brought in some vegetarian kosher food. And at the end of the meal, there were what they call fortune cookies. I don't know. I know you're all Jews, but I don't know if you all know about Chinese food. They always have fortune cookies. Myself, I'm not a Chinese food lover. I think I'm the only Jew that doesn't like Chinese food. But that's a story for another day. Anyway, I opened the first fortune cookie, pulled it out, and it said, "You are going on a vacation." Oh, that's the first time I ever had a fortune cookie that was close to what really was going on in my life. Okay. There was an extra fortune cookie, so they gave it to me. I opened it up. Learn how to swim. Oh my God. And then we get this weather forecast. So I'm not sure this is actually going to happen. But if it does, I already gave you what's going to be. So be careful next Shabbos. If you can't dial in, try the YouTube. All right? At the YouTube. It's in the emails. And if you don't get my emails, I don't know how you got the link to this, but if you don't get the emails, just go to YouTube and search for Rabbi Eli Perlman, Perlman, and you'll find it, and it'll be the one that's live. Okay? So that's about it. No big deal. All righty. You know, it's funny because, as I said, tomorrow night and Monday morning I'll be saying Kaddish for my father. It's his yahrzeit. And he just loved to laugh. He loved to make people laugh more than to laugh. He loved it. He got such a kick out of when he saw somebody laugh. He just loved it. And he was one of the funniest people alive. The funniest person I ever met in my whole life is my baby brother, Josh. I mean, this guy's just funny. I'm convinced if he went to a cemetery, he'd have them all laughing, coming out of the graves laughing. That's how funny he is. Anyway, let's talk about today's Torah reading a little bit. It is describing the process by which our ancestors made free will donations toward the construction of the portable desert sanctuary. We call that the Mishkan or the Tabernacle, but it's a sanctuary in the desert and it's portable. Now think about how portable it was. It weighed just a lot. It used to take a lot of people to carry it. You know, they had those like sticks that picked it up and took several people to carry it. Amazing. But they did. But many of the commentaries for this week's Torah reading speak about the importance of donating tzedakah, which most people think means charity, but it really doesn't. It doesn't mean charity. The word implies doing something righteous or right. What could be more righteous than giving donations to people, right? So that's why the word tzedakah became synonymous with charity, even though that's not really what it means. But I want to tell you a story. I know once in a while I tell stories and people tend to like them. So it's a story that teaches. And it teaches us how to give tzedakah. It also shows that how we give is much more important than what we give. In other words, how much I give is secondary to how I give it. And we're going to find out about that too. Furthermore, it shows that it is up to each of us to do what we can so that we each contribute to making the world just a little bit better. Just a little bit better than the way we found it. So here's the story. It's about Rabbi Eliyahu Chaim Meisel. He served for 10 years as the rabbi of Lodz. It's a large city in western Poland, and was one of the greatest scholars of the second half of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. He was recognized as a great scholar. Besides his greatness in Torah, Rabbi Meisel was also known as a man of mercy, and even in his old age, he spared no effort to help anyone and everyone in need. No questions asked, he just helped. You know, one Thursday evening, and it's important that it was a Thursday evening because it adds to what happened here, and you'll see. Rabbi Meisel was sitting in his office with his grandson Eliezer at home. I guess it was his library, and he was sitting there, and they were discussing questions that the wise rabbi had about a complicated Talmudic issue, and he was discussing it with his grandson. Certainly the rabbi was much more learned, but he didn't know the answer, and he was trying to figure out, let's look at a different point of view. Suddenly there's a knock on the door. A man comes in and places a valuable book on the rabbi's table and said, "Recently, my livelihood has been cut short. I have decided to sell this book to be able to buy some food for my wife and children." So Rabbi Meisel asked the man how much the book cost, and the guest told him the price. Immediately, the rabbi took out a sum of money that was more than twice as much as the price of the book, and said to the man, "Listen, make sure to tell everyone in Lodz, make sure to tell everyone, and the surrounding cities, that I purchased this book from you at full price. Make sure you do. And many good people will understand and help others the same way." It's very important. Make sure you tell them that I bought the book at the full price. Anyway, the man agrees and he leaves, and he's very happy, very thankful. And Eliezer asked his great-grandfather, not his great-grandfather, his great-grandfather, grandfather was a great man. You know, he says, "As we both know, you have at least 3 copies of this book in your library. What made you want to buy another copy of this book from this man for more than double the full price? Why?" And then you tell everybody I didn't do that. I only bought it at the full price. Rabbi Meisel answered his grandson by saying, "You know, it's true that I already have several copies of this book, maybe more than 3. But I bought it. Could I have acted differently? Of course I could have acted differently. But think about it. Think about it. Today's Thursday, which means tomorrow, Shabbat starts. Tomorrow evening, Erev Shabbat. If the bookseller comes to my house this late in the evening, like he did, it means that he does not have what he needs at home for his family to celebrate a proper Shabbat. Obviously, he's too ashamed to go from door to door to beg for charity. He's too ashamed. That is why he brought me this book, in the hope that I would buy it. Since I know how much money a family needs to celebrate Shabbat properly, I gave him what he would need without paying attention to the actual price of the book in the store. because I really wasn't buying a book. That's it. That's the end of the story. The story teaches a concept that's totally familiar to anyone who has ever learned of Rambam's 8 levels of charity. For those who are not familiar with it, here are the levels. Each one is higher than the one before. I'm starting with the lowest level of tzedakah, of charity. I know some of you have heard it, but maybe it's good to have it reminded once in a while. When you give a donation grudgingly, like you go to something and then people say, who would like to give? And people stand up and somebody else, I'll give this, but they don't want to give. It's just they're ashamed not to because everybody else is giving. Or somebody comes to the door and, yeah, all right. But you really don't care about it and you don't want to give it, but you give it grudgingly. That is still a level of tzedakah that is good, but it's the least good of the ones coming up. The next one is 7, is when the donor gives less than one should, but does so cheerfully. I'm so happy to be able to give you this to help you out. They could have given more, but, or maybe they should have given more. Maybe whether they can or not is not relevant. They should have given more, but whatever they gave, I'm so happy to do it. The 6th level, when a donor gives directly to the poor upon being asked. So somebody comes to you, I'm a poor person, I need some tzedakah, I need some money. So you just give it to them. I don't know if how many of you have ever been to a daily minyan, but at a daily minyan they always have a pushka out. And people come, and after they do the Amidah, they put money in this pushka. Whatever they put in, doesn't matter. They don't know what it's for, or who it's going to go to, but they put it in the pushka. Why? If case somebody comes and asks for money because they're poor and need money, you're supposed to give them that money without asking any questions. I don't know if you know that. There's no accounting for that money. You're not allowed to account for it. Just give it to them. And I know the Daily Minyan used to have a pushka, and they would give money to different organizations when they would get questions. It was rare that somebody would come in and say, I need money, but they used to collect a lot of money every day. And they would give it without being really... they were asked, and they just gave it. Beautiful. Now, the next one is the other way around. I'm sorry. It's not the other way around. When you give directly to the poor, but you aren't asked. In other words, you're walking down the street in New York, and you walk by a homeless person. You see they have a cup, but they're not asking you for anything. They're just sitting there. Maybe they're playing music. Whatever they're doing, and you take your hand, you put it in your pocket, and you give some money into the cup. That's number 5. You're giving without being asked to the poor. So you're almost to the end. 4, donations when a recipient knows who the donor is, but the donor does not know the identity of the recipient. Now, we know of situations where Chaim Yankel gives money to, let's say, the Federation or to the temple, and they give money to the poor or to an organization that treats the poor. They don't know I gave the money, or Chaim Yankel gave the money, or they don't know. So they don't know the donor, but you know that you're giving the money, but you don't know who's getting it. Now, they may be told that Chaim Yankel gave the money because Chaim Yankel gave so much money. So the recipient may know who the donor is, but the donor has no idea about the recipient. Number 4. Number 3, Donations when the donor knows the recipient, but the recipient is unaware of the source. So I want to give Joe Schlemiel over there, I want to give Joe Schlemiel a donation, but I don't want him to know where it came from. Sometimes relatives do that. They figure out how to get money to a person in their family, and they don't want them to know that it came from them. There's many examples of that. Number 2, giving when the donor and the recipient have no idea about the other one. In other words, I give and you take, and there's middlemen, and you have no idea who gave and who took. Nobody knows. This would be communal funds like Federation, like when the temple gives money to people. And you never really say who gave it or where it came from. It's administered by very responsible people who are doing this, who are working the same way that we do according to these levels. However, the one thing you need to know, the organization is not the government. It's an organization completely set up to help others. It's not the government who takes and skims and hides and cheats. It's not one of those, right? It's always that way with government. It's never the government. And when you gave to the temple, yes, things could happen, but not at the level the government does. And when they gave to the temple during temple times, it was kind of like that. There was no accounting. They just gave it. All right, the best and highest form of charity, you probably all know what it is to help sustain a person before they become impoverished. You offer a substantial gift in a dignified manner, or you extend a suitable loan which may or may not have to be repaid, or, the best of all, you get them a job so that they can establish themselves in business to make it unnecessary for them to become dependent on others in the future. You know, we are all dependent on others, all of us. I don't know how many of you had to have a job during your life, but you're dependent on others when you work. They pay you. You know, you can't really get a job from a poor person because they can't pay you. But you get a job, you get paid, you're dependent on others. You're dependent, if you own the business, you're dependent on customers who buy things. But that's different than being dependent on others because you have to walk around and panhandle. Why? Because the highest form of charity is the kind that preserves and it helps rebuild the recipient's dignity. You have dignity when you go to work, and if you get a big loan and you can start a business or whatever, you have dignity. Poverty is an assault on that. It's an assault on one's pride. The worst thing we can do as Jews is to take away someone's dignity. That is the worst. One thing we should never, ever do is to tell somebody in need, oh, why don't you just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and fix it? Why? You can't say that to somebody. That's one of the worst things to say. Unless you're willing to give them what they need to do it, then it's fine. Here, let me give you this so you can get yourself picked up on your bootstraps and solve the problem for yourself. I'll give you a job. I'll give you a huge loan. I'll give you a tremendous amount of whatever to help you go. Then you can say it. But that's not an answer if you don't want to help. Gemilut chasadim, or acts of loving kindness, and tikkun olam, or repairing the world, is what it means. Acts of loving kindness or repairing the world, gemilut chasadim, tikkun olam. They are among the most foundational and fundamental tenets of Jewish life. So when it comes to giving tzedakah, always remember this. If it is to be, it is up to me. So never ask who, always behave as a Jew. Shabbat Shalom, and don't forget, Am Yisroel Chai.